Inshallah, before we begin the Khaatir, if I could please ask each row to pass the boxes. There should be one on each side, two in each row. If there's anything near you, just pass it down. Jazakumullah khair. Community iftars are held in Tarbiya House, Roseville, Nokomis, and Al Grove every single Friday. To sponsor an iftar or sahur, we have a few spots remaining and need your help to fully sponsor them this year. Please check in at our office manager's table if you'd like to sponsor one. Partial sponsorships are also welcome. This year's Zakatul Fitr is $20 per person, and Zakatul Mal can be calculated on the Zakat page on our website using the Zakat calculator. Our Sunnah Club program is available. It's a child care program for all children ages 3 to 9, and the children must be potty trained. Mutual Dua at night. Join us next Friday night at 9:30 p.m. for our Ramadan Mutual Dua at night. Our second Sisters Qiyam is tonight at 11 p.m. at Tarbiya House, Nokomis. Please bring finger food to share and sign up to volunteer for the night. Our second Brothers Qiyam will be held tonight starting at 11 p.m. here at Tarbiya House, Roseville. So for all brothers, all ages, we ask you to join us tonight, inshallah, after Taraweeh. Our third Youth Qiyam is next Friday at Tarbiya House, Roseville. We begin at 11 p.m. The age range is 13 to 23. Join us for a night of tahajjud, bonfires, trivia, individual ibadah time, and more. Inshallah, we'll have a fruit truck at this Qiyam as well. Tarbiya is proud to host its first ever Quran competition. You have a beautiful recitation of the Holy Quran. This is your chance to showcase your talent and compete for exciting prizes. The competition is open to boys and girls of all ages. It will be held here at Tarbiya House, Roseville on April 7th from 1:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Surahs and levels have been released on social media and on our website. We are currently looking for sponsors for our prizes. So if you want any information, please visit the office manager's table. Jazakumullah khair and assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. I wanted to emphasize, inshallah, again, two more things. The Qiyam tonight, this is a brother's Qiyam. So all of our brothers here, men, boys, all of us, inshallah, you're invited to join us for the Qiyam program. And this is going to go all the way through Salat al-Fajr. We're going to have a beautiful program, inshallah ta'ala, for you, including khatiras and tahajjud and suhoor and so forth. So we'd love, inshallah, to see you. Also, there is a box by the door that is dedicated to our zakat in general. So all of your fidya, zakatul fitr, zakatul mal, your fitrana, all of that, inshallah, is going to go in that box. If you prefer to do it online with a credit card instead, you can always do that on the Tarbiya website, inshallah ta'ala. I will mention, inshallah, the last remaining announcement after my sisters have quieted down. You guys are ready? Thank you. As far as our fundraising campaign goes, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, last Friday, not yesterday, the Friday before, I announced our need here at the Tarbiya House, Roseville, for $600,000 this month of Ramadan, inshallah, 500 of which will go into our annual balloon payment. And I also said that after this Ramadan, inshallah, we have only one more payment left, and this building is completely paid off. So again, I'm looking forward, inshallah, to that day. In addition to that, we only needed an additional $100,000 to help with offset, operating expenses and so forth. So since I made the announcement last Friday, so it's been like 9 days, 8-9 days, something like that. Alhamdulillah, thus far, we've raised $235,000. And so we're getting very close to 50% of the amount. And I know that there's a significant amount that usually comes in the last 10 nights and so forth. Again, if you plan to do that, that's perfectly fine. Just let me know so I can tally it up and add it to the sheet, inshallah, and announce it to the community to keep our fundraising going. Again, we only come to you with requests for funds only twice a year. In Ramadan, for our capital campaign in order to pay for the building, and in the fall in order basically to do the subscription campaign for the operating expenses. That's it. We try to be very careful with the frequency of asking you for money, so I apologize if I've been bombarding you with this throughout the month of Ramadan. The alternative is to organize these annoying banquets and, you know, the flyers and speakers and food and massive expenses in order to achieve the same thing. So we just decided to cut through the chase and remind you over 30 nights of our financial needs. Those of you who were not here yesterday, we also announced, alhamdulillah, the opening of escrow of our Natumus building, which inshallah ta'ala is going to be hopefully a beacon of spreading the da'wah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam and Islamic education in the area of Natumus, very close to downtown Sacramento, very close to the seat of power of the state. And so that is going to be absolutely significant. But obviously they're doing their own fundraising campaign over there. But I say that inshallah we need to pull our own weight, make sure that we pay off our building. Remember, we have those, you know, empty 5 acres. Got to do something about that. So we need to pay this off, inshallah, in order to look out into the future and decide as a community, inshallah, of the best usage of that facility. So please text me or give me a call or talk to me after Salat al-Tarawih and say, you know, I would like to pledge this amount. You can pay it off over a few months. Pay it off in Ramadan, Laylatul Qadr, you know, use cash, check, credit card, Venmo, whatever. Let's make it happen, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Again, this month we are trying to learn from the beautiful spiritual insights of Imam Abul-Faraj, ibn-ul-Jawzi, through his beautiful book, al-Khaatir, Captured Thoughts. And I said that Imam Abul-Faraj used to, every time a beautiful spiritual thought occurs to him, he would just write it down on a piece of paper. Taught us all the art of journaling and the art of putting our thoughts on paper on a daily basis. In his 60s, he realized that he has enough content to publish a book that was the culmination of his spiritual wisdom, and that book was al-Khaatir, Captured Thoughts. That is the book that has become the foundation of our Khatira series this year. One of the things that Imam Abul-Faraj did, however, which is not very characteristic of the scholars of his age, is that he spoke from the heart and got vulnerable. You know that very modern concept, you got to be vulnerable, you got to show your fragility in order to get to people's hearts. You know, Imam Abul-Faraj was a preacher of the masses, right? He's not the ivory tower type scholar, he was a man of the people, and so he's used to opening his heart. And I found in one of the chapters of the book something that is so endearing and is so beautiful and is so real that he mentions. And he says, حَدَّثَتْنِي يَوْمًا أَنْ أَرْتَكِبَ مَكْرُوهًا. My nafs compelled me one day to commit something that is not haram, something that is makruh. You know what makruh is? Something that is detestable, something that Allah hates, subhanahu wa ta'ala. For those of you who may not know, you know, there is the 5 designations of deeds in fiqh, right? There is something that is fard, which is mandatory or obligatory. There is something that is mustahab or mandub, which is meritorious. For example, you know, helping a blind man cross the street. It's not fard, but it would be mustahab for you to do. And then there is mubah, something that is permissible. It is not bad or good particularly. It does not hold any moral quality in and of itself, such as driving a car, for example, or, you know, any of these mundane things, you know, that we're wearing a watch, the things that we wear, that we do every day. And then there is the category, the 4th category of makruh. Makruh is something that is less than haram, so it's not quite haram, but it's detested. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes so much. And then there's obviously the 5th category of haram, which you cannot do. So you can only do the 4, but you can't do the 5th one. So he says, my nafs whispered to me one day in order to do something that is makruh. Subhanallah, like he's having a conversation with the self. He's having a conversation with his own nafs as if it's a third party, as if it's a different person, right? And so his nafs, he says, it made this very strong case, but when I looked at the arguments, I realized that they were all empty and hollow. So I wanted to distract myself from the incessant whispering of the ego, and I opened the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a great way, by the way, to escape a moment of weakness. If your nafs is getting you to do something that is haram or something that is makruh, open up the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, I opened the book of Allah and I kept reading, waiting to see a sign, until I came across Surah Yusuf, where Yusuf alayhi salam talks to the wife of the nobleman of Egypt. You guys remember the story? Azizu Misr. He lived in their house. He was basically their house slave. And then when her husband was out and about, his wife came in order to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam. So his response to her was, قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. He said to the wife of the nobleman, I seek refuge in Allah. I seek Allah's protection from what you're asking me to do. Your husband is my Lord. He's the Lord of this house, and he has made my present here pleasant and goodly. How could I betray him? And Abul-Faraj says, that's when I stopped. And I went back to my nafs. And I said, listen very carefully. Look at what Yusuf said. Yusuf was a free man, honorable, the son of great prophets. He was taken into captivity, separated from his parents and his family, sold into slavery. He was basically trafficked into another country, right? It was human trafficking. He was trafficked into Egypt. And in Egypt, he was taken in by this slave master, the nobleman of Egypt, Azizu Misr. Yet, because the man treated him with kindness, and, عَسَى أَن نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا, let's treat him kindly, maybe he'll become like a son to us. أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَاي, he gave me a good room, and gave me good food, and gave me good clothes. I cannot betray him. And Imam Abul-Faraj says, Yusuf even used the word Rabbi, which means my Lord, in reference to the nobleman, just because he treated him well. And he says to his wife, how could I possibly betray this man that took care of me and honored me and took me into his home? He was still a slave, but he still felt that he owes this man good treatment, at least, that he does not stab him in the back, that he does not accept the seduction of his wife. Now, Abul-Faraj still talks to his nafs, and he says to his nafs, this is a man who treats his slave master properly. Now imagine how you are supposed to treat your true master. How are you supposed to treat the one that you actually owe Ubudiyyah to? The one that you voluntarily surrendered yourself to? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the world. How could you possibly do something that your true master hates? How could you possibly do something that your true master detests? The true Lord of everything and everyone, that has taken care of you and honored you and nurtured you and protected you and guided you and preserved you and gave you from everything in this life and established you with strength. How could you possibly betray your true Lord that has given you prophets and messengers, that has given you parents and siblings and spouse and community? How could you possibly betray the one that has given you Islam, the one that promised you Jannah? Subhanallah. And he kept going on and on and on, detailing the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon him, in order to convince his own soul not to commit something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates. We're not even talking about haram, we're talking about makruh. Brothers and sisters, if you use every drop of ink in this world to write down the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you, you will run out of both ink and paper. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran? قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَذَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي. If all the oceans are ink, to be used for us to write the words of God, we will run out of ink before we've written all of them, even if that is replaced or refilled by more ink. Truly, brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in the Quran that His blessings are so abundant that they are innumerable. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you literally sit every single day and count your blessings, as they say, you will run out of time before you actually reach the very end of Allah's blessings upon you. And those are the things that you know for sure. Now imagine the things that you do not know. We take the matter of makruh very, very lightly. A lot of people take the matter of the detestable acts very, very lightly. These young people, they come to me, Imam, is this halal or haram? I say, well, it's not haram, but it's makruh. Okay, khalas, I'll do it. I just told you God hates it. I literally just told you God hates it, and you're still ready to go and do well. If it was haram, He would have said it was haram. Is that your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is that how it is? God has to treat you, with this master-slave relationship and draw very clear boundaries to you and tell you, if you do this, I'll give you that reward, and if you don't do that, I'll give you that punishment. Is that your relationship with God? There is no love, there is no affection, there is no trust, there's no dependence, there's no reliance. If you love someone for real, you would compete to please that person. You would not go around and do things that you know for sure that this particular beloved of yours hates so much. Brothers and sisters, this month of Ramadan we're talking about spiritual sustainability, right? How to maintain our spirituality throughout the year. And you cannot do that unless you resolve your relationship with the things that are makruh. You cannot maintain your spirituality throughout the year unless you resolve the relationship with things that are detestable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know people who always dance on the line of fire? Oh, this is haram, and that's everything beyond haram is halal, right? Including makruh, it's still halal. I'm just going to do it, right? But what is it that happens when you have this attitude? The little butterflies, the little moths, right? If you have a candle lit up at home, in the backyard, whatever, what is it? Do you think that moths just go and burn in the candle intentionally? What is it that moths were thinking in their minds to do? It's just so warm around here. I'm just going to keep dancing, and I'm going to keep flying, and I'm going to keep jumping around the fire. I'm not going to be burnt by the fire. I just want to get the warmth of the fire, but I'm going to stay just like a couple of millimeters away. What happens every single time we act like this? The moths will eventually get burned. Rasulullah tells you this in the hadith. كَمَنْ يَرْعَى حَوْلَ الْحِمَى فَيُوشِكُ أَنْ يَقْعَ فِيهِ. There is a king, and that king has, grazed land for his own livestock. And then this random Bedouin that comes with his own goats and sheep, right? And they told him, that is the line, that's the territory of the king. You don't bring your animals to graze into the territory of the king. So he does what? He keeps bringing the goats and the sheep to graze as close as possible to the line. What's going to happen eventually? One of the sheep or the goat will step into the land that belongs to the king, right? وَإِنَّ لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ حِمًا وَحِمَ اللَّهُ مَحَارِمُهُ. Every king has a territory that he protects, and the territory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the things that are haram. So you don't come even near the things that are haram. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits zina in the Quran, what does He say? إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Indeed, fornication is a great horrific act, but it is also the path that leads to it that is just as detestable. From the very beginning of that path, you don't take the steps. You don't walk down the slippery slope and then say, well, it's halal, right? We're just hanging out. It's halal. And then you keep taking one step that leads to the other until you step into something that is haram, right? One last thought here. What happens to people who commit the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala detests and hates so much? Yusuf alayhi salam answers that question in that same ayah, right? قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. He calls them ظالمون. He calls them unjust, transgressors. Why? Because they transgress against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and against themselves. Instead of showing gratitude, they step into something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates and detests so much. The attitude of the believer is not to ask what is haram so that I can avoid it. Rather, is to ask what is good and beautiful and loved by Allah so I can do it. Give me as much of that as possible. And the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, I'm not even going to look at them. I can't afford to make Allah angry. Even if it's not haram, I cannot afford to do that. I want my love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remain strong. I want my spirituality to remain stable and consistent throughout the year. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the strength and the fortitude to avoid anything that is nearly hated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our natural inclination to do the things that are clean and beautiful and sublime. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وقوموا إلى صلاتكم.